Anyone else out there got orchid fever? I know I'm not the only one. It hasn't been that long for me, but at this point, there's no going back. It all started with the first orchid I ever saw that was not a Phalaenopsis. Dendrobium mini snowflake. I saw this plant for sale at a botanical garden that looked interesting. It was weird. Stalks that were thin on the bottom, bulbous on top, each sporting leaves that looked like some kind of alien whale fluke. I asked what it was and was told it was an orchid. So I figured, well, if I can never get this thing to flower again, at least the plant looks cool, right? When those buds opened up, I couldn't stop looking at them. They were pure white and sparkled under my grow light. So naturally, I researched orchid care for this particular genus, leading me to discover other types of beautiful dendrobiums, which made me wonder, what other orchids are out there? The rest is kind of a blur of watching endless orchid videos, joining orchid Facebook groups, and orchid hunting through local specialty orchid shops. Anyway, not gonna lie, I used to think orchids were quite boring and, dare I say, pedestrian, not knowing there was an entire culture of orchid growing and cultivating behind a big curtain of half-dead phalaenopsises in Home Depots and grocery stores. Once that curtain was pulled, I discovered something that intrigued me, something that captivated me, something deeper than I could fully explain. Orchids seem intelligent without having a brain. They crown themselves with flowers in a range of gorgeous colors and shapes when they can't even see. They release powerful perfumes at specific times of the day or night to lure in their pollinators of choice, and smell of nothing at other times. They are architects, having created some of the most elaborate and complex structures in the natural world in the form of a dainty little flower, sometimes meant for one specific insect and no other. Orchids are cunning. They are plotting. They are driven to survive and have chosen to do so in the most remarkable of ways. Okay, William Shakespeare, just slow your roll right there. While I am still very much a beginner orchid grower, I think it's worth sharing what I've learned in getting them to bloom again. Mind you, Orchidaceae is a worldwide plant family that is so big and so diverse. Each genus of orchids within this family, having evolved in different corners of the earth, will have varying care requirements. The orchid care in this video will apply specifically to the most popular genus in the family, Phalaenopsis. I've also applied this care routine to my Oncidium orchid, which has also rebloomed. Alright, you know what? Enough chit-chat. Let's get right into the goods. Light. This is perhaps the most crucial aspect of orchid care. Most of the time, the brightest window with ambient sunlight in our home just isn't enough. And midday direct sun will cause leaf burn. Among the 28,000 species of orchids, 70% are epiphytic. They have evolved to grow in very bright sunlight that is slightly softened and diffused by the canopies above. Filtered sunlight, bright shade, or a grow light equivalent is absolutely necessary for most orchids to spike and bloom. Now, while I adore their flowers, I'm not that fond of the plants themselves. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. There are orchids that are just as beautiful without foliage, like Phalaenopsis schilleriana. But overall, without their crown of color, most are visually just you know what I'm saying? So I recommend having a show area to display your orchids in full bloom and a grow area to place them while they are not in bloom. Think of a setup off to the side that's maybe not your big living room windowsill or entryway. I put my orchids in my closet grow tent for those several boring months. Here they grow vegetatively, storing away energy for the next blooming cycle. Seeing the first spike to the first open flower can be a matter of weeks to even months. So I wait for the spike to fully form and the first few flowers to open before taking it out of its grow area and into its show area. Orchids in bloom seem perfectly okay under slightly less than ideal light. Mind you, I still give them a generous grow light so those flowers last as long as possible. But it's a light I can put into one of my lamps. And it's aesthetically pleasing for my living space. unlike that big, ugly, blinding light in my grow tent. Having a grow area and a show area really made the time fly by. Because while my orchid was busy growing new leaves, I could fill that extra space in my windowsill with visually stunning plants I enjoy looking at every day. Like my aeroids. Watering and substrate. Most orchids grow up in the trees and require air around their roots as much as moisture. Let's keep it simple. Water thoroughly when completely dry. Grow orchids in moisture-retentive sphagnum moss if you tend to underwater. Grow in freely draining bark if you tend to overwater. And conveniently enough, most orchids are sold already growing in one of these substrates. Phalaenopsis roots turn green when they are hydrated and silver when they are dehydrated. And don't let the roots stay dry for too long. Once they shrivel up, that's a dead root you're going to want to remove. Repotting. Only repot if your orchid is root-bound or needs rehabbing. And never disturb the roots while it's in bloom. If your flowering orchid has a struggling root system and needs a repot, you must cut the flower spike off completely. This is because when an orchid thinks it's dying, it'll throw all its energy into preserving those flowers, so pollinators can continue spreading their genes for future generations. Talk about commitment to your craft. Orchids would rather die wearing those beautiful flowers, because they know how ugly they are without them. I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm not, but whatever. Don't at me. Moving on. Finally, fertilizer. Fertilize when you water. Most orchids in nature, being epiphytes, have to make their own nutrients from photosynthesis alone. In homes, however, it's a little different. Usually light levels are not ideal for orchids, so a little boost with fertilizer helps. I've asked many experienced orchid growers which fertilizer is best, and I tell you, I've gotten 100 different answers, which can mean only one thing, that they are not picky at the dinner table. But for what it's worth, I am using Better Grow, Better Bloom 11-35-15. And they're happy, so I guess I recommend it. Orchids truly are artists of another realm humans will never fully understand. And yet they have managed to lure us in as much as those little bugs. They have had us in a trance for hundreds of years, and it has cost them. With a dark history of orchid hunting and forest burning to keep competitors from collecting the same species, orchid populations in the wild have reached scarce numbers. One of the most ancient flowering plants in the world, a family of organisms that has outlived the dinosaurs. The natural world is full of wonders, and I believe it is the very source of human imagination. Orchids are just one example. We have a responsibility to Mother Nature. We owe her so much, but the very least we can do is take a second look at our plants and appreciate them on a deeper level, because there's a lot of evolution to unravel in that pretty little flower on your windowsill. They say Rome wasn't made overnight, and you know what? Neither were orchids. Did you know I have a music channel? I'll leave a link for it in my bio. And if you enjoy the content that I make here, I would really appreciate it if you guys go check out my music channel, check out some of my music videos. I got more music videos that I'm making this year, so yeah, it's gonna be awesome. All right, I'm out of here. So this has been Jake and Zara, also known as Planky for Life. Ciao.